Good afternoon, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to another exciting episode of Blether, your weekly breakdown of news and politics in Scotland. As always, throughout the show, we do want to hear what you were thinking, so please do leave comments down below. We will be monitoring them. In not a creepy way, I realise monitoring comments sounds really sinister. But no, just kind of watching along and see what you want to say, and maybe taking a couple of comments throughout the show. So we do always appreciate your participation. And if you can give this video a wee share as well, that would be excellent. So thank you for tuning in. Joining me this week is Angela Haggerty from Common Space.
Hello.
And our special guest, Rosie Dickson from the WASPI campaign
Hi.
in Glasgow. So yeah, I guess we wanted to start the show talking a little bit about the WASPI campaign because pensions have been in the news recently. But actually, I think let's start by taking it further back than that. What is the WASPI campaign for anyone who's watching who doesn't know exactly what the campaign is already?
Well, we started up the WASPI campaign for Glasgow and Lanarkshire about 2 years ago. And what happened is that women that were born in the 1950s had their pension age changed in 1995 and then changed further in 2011. And they had little or no notice of that. I'm still meeting ladies in the street who think they're able to retire at 60 because colleagues a couple of years ago had retired at 60. So we've started up the campaign and we're very active on Facebook, by email. We've had a couple of marches through Glasgow. We've got a committee in Holyrood now, an all-party group, and an all-party political group down at Westminster because we're a national group. And essentially we're not against equalisation of the state age, but we're protesting against the way that it was actually introduced. And these women were given absolutely no notice. And with 4 ladies in our group who were born in the same year, and their state pension ages are 6 years apart. It's unbelievable. And it's meant that there could be no planning for their pensions. A lot of these ladies are working in the public sector in really heavy jobs, expecting to get their occupational pension and their state pension at 60, if they do have an occupational pension. A lot of these ladies were in work before the equal pay was actually put into place, and they were actively discouraged from having occupational pensions as well. So essentially that's the background for the WASPI group. Anybody who finds that they've been affected by these state pension changes and who would like to join it, you can get us on the Facebook at WASPI Glasgow and Lanarkshire, or email us at waspiglas73@gmail.com.
I guess, so you mentioned some of the reasons there, but like how exactly has it came around that you are seeing this disparity where people born in the same year are getting very different pension settlements?
Well, it started in 1995 when they passed the Pension Act, and that was for equalisation of the state pension age. Now, that was very, very badly publicised. It was only printed in a couple of newspapers, and nobody I've met actually got a letter in 1995 to tell them that that was actually being changed. And then in 2011, they changed it again, and they changed the goalposts to accelerate these changes. And women quite often had just a couple of months' notice if they did get notice of that before their pension age was being changed.
So what kind of victories have the WASPI campaign had?
Well, we started from nothing, and as I say, so far we've got an all-party group going in Holyrood. We've got an all-party political group down in Westminster. We are actually taking the DWP. We're writing letters to the DWP about the maladministration of how this was actually introduced, these changes. So we're hoping to get the Ombudsman to look at how these changes were put in place.
And there was a suggestion recently as well, wasn't there, that some of the women affected with this should just get apprenticeships to kind of deal with?
Oh yeah, Well, as well as that, some of the big successes we've had is we've had 10 debates in the House of Commons on this issue. And the last debate we had, the new Minister for Pensions, Mr. Oberman, suggested that ladies could go and get work easily, which is not the case. If you're at 60, you're applying for a job, you know. And he said that there were actually apprenticeships in place for these ladies. So as you can imagine, that caused great consternation amongst our ladies, and so many of them want to be plumbers, but they just can't get into a job because they're 16 to 19-year-olds wanted, not 60-year-olds.
You said that that WASPI is protesting not so much against the equalisation of the age, the way that it was introduced.
Yes.
So ultimately, what victory would you be looking for?
Well, we're looking for fairer transitional arrangements for the state pension age for everybody who was caught up in it, because people just couldn't plan for the retirement because they were expecting to get their pensions. And it's so funny, the parallels with the recent changes, because in 1995 I was 38, you know, and I was like, yeah, it's fine, whatever, you know. The pension ages are going to change. And then at the time they didn't actually publish the timetable either. So they said it was going to be like brought in gradually. So I thought I would probably be maybe about 61 or 62. It would only be a year or two's delay, and in my case it's 6 years. So so that's what we're protesting about, the way that nobody got any notice, and I think there could be absolutely no planning for it, and the fact that we
So are
actually
you
paid our
hoping for any
national
kind
insurance.
of, like, compensation to try and help?
Yeah, well, we want the government to sit down and actually talk to us, because what they're doing essentially is they're just ignoring us. This is a problem and it needs to be addressed, and we need to look for some kind of solution to it. Now, whether that solution is, we're asking for fair transitional arrangements and to sit round the table and see what can be introduced.
And obviously, also this week in the news with regards to pensions was the bringing forward of, I guess, the sort of retirement age, or rather extending the retirement age, but 7 years earlier than planned. So the situation just now where millions of folk, I think between 1970 to 1978, if you're born then, are going to be working an extra year because of this like sudden shift. I mean, is it having an impact on like folk affected by the sort of WASPI campaign as
Oh,
well?
absolutely. I mean, I can only say to the young people, that are, the younger people that are affected, is to look at us. I mean, you wear out a crystal ball when you're 37, 38. You get to 60. I didn't expect to get a sore leg at 60, you know. A lot of people are in very heavy manual work and things, you know, and you just physically can't work until you're 68. So, yeah, I mean, we can't offer you a time machine, but we can offer you our experiences about getting to state retirement age and having it delayed, you know. Plus, another thing is, if your children are working to the 68, you're going to have popped your clogs before they retire as well, so you're not going to have any time with them in their retirement either, you know.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like not necessarily being prepared for retirement, I saw a great phrase the other day, which is, "My retirement plan is socialism," and hope that by the time I get to that old, we've just sorted out all our problems and it'll be okay. Obviously, WASPI, you're saying, is like a UK-wide campaign,
Yes.
so this is kind of affecting a lot of people. But Scotland specifically is getting a bit of a raw deal here, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
like about £11,000 less for women in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK.
Well, the lowest life expectancy in the UK is in Glasgow for women. It makes horrendous reading, and men obviously. It makes horrible, horrendous reading, and again impacts in this future increase. We aren't all living longer. I mean, there was another paper came out just the day before they had the debate in Parliament to say that it wasn't the case, and austerity is starting to bite, and there is a halt in this increase in life expectancy. Yeah, and I think that hits women in Glasgow really hard, because we've all seen colleagues and friends who haven't even made it to their state pension, and then when you do reach your state pension age, you know, if you're 66, how many of those years are actually going to be in good health, and how many years are you actually going to get your pension for?
Well, Glasgow especially as well. I mean, if we're talking about £11,000 for compared to the rest of the UK for Scotland, I think Glasgow is 22,000. Like, it's actually worse in Glasgow. Like that sort of settlement at the end. I mean, I guess like, but the WASPI campaign is UK wide, so it's dealing with this
Yes.
everywhere. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, Angela, have you been following much of the pensions campaign or any of the news recently this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm terrified at the thought of pensions, absolutely terrified, because I think so many people in my generation, I was born in 1986, and so many people that I know that I went to school with, none of us are thinking about pensions, we're not planning. There's no, how can you plan? Even people that are in what you would consider to be established jobs where they should have secure incomes, they're still muddling by, quite often on freelance contracts now. You can't plan for a future around that.
Exactly.
You can't even plan for right now around it, never mind 30, 40 years down the road. So I've said for years, I think we're going to be heading towards, if we think we've been having pensions crises recently, we could be heading towards something even bigger than that. And you add in all the problems with social care, reform, all of these things on top of that. And the problem is that in politics, it's all short-termism. You know, it's MPs that want to be elected for 4 or 5 years, or governments that are looking at probably 10, 15 years before they get down, someone else gets a shot for a while. Nobody's thinking about what are we going to do in 30 years, what are we going to do in 40 years to solve this problem. So we need big long-term thinking to actually fix this. I don't have an awful lot of confidence that that's really out there among the political system we've got at the moment, which is worrying.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you. There needs to be a holistic approach to this, because, as you say, the care costs, and a lot of the women in my group would actually be giving care to elderly relatives and things, you know. And then by the time you're made to work those extra years, you're in worse health yourself when you retire, so you're going to be looking at the care system as well. And pensions, for us, were a universal benefit. So to be asked to go into the actual benefit system and ask for ESAs and things which you probably won't qualify for is just ridiculous. The whole thing it needs to be just looked at from the ground up again.
Yeah, especially when you consider things like the fact that, as you're saying, it's not necessarily just the state age changing when you start to get it, but the fact that the predicament of people who are in work just now, with the growth of like the gig economy and what kind of impact that's going to have over the long term, where people are not necessarily making enough money, people are not necessarily paying into pensions. It's, again, these are things like you say, it's short-termism. It's like, well, that's a problem for later on. We don't really need to deal with it just now, and in fact, a bigger overhaul of how we are actually approaching work would probably be a better way of dealing with that. But coming back again to not necessarily just WASPI, but more like, to do with pay for women in general. Another big, of course, the publication of the salaries of folk in the BBC. And basically, for anyone who doesn't know what it was the BBC published the list of everyone who works there who's earning over £150,000. And it kind of revealed a lot of problems to do with like how that payments are going out. So, for example, out of the 96 names or so, only a third of them were women, and even less than that were BME folk. So, essentially, a lot of white men being paid the most in the BBC. And the problem that was really highlighted was that in some instances, people who were doing the same jobs, near enough, were actually on widely disparaging pay rates, which is, of course, the foundation of the pay gap, which has been discussed a lot. Do you think that the BBC are going to have to maybe start really actually addressing this issue now that these salaries are out there for everyone to see?
Oh, absolutely, and I don't think it should just be restricted to the BBC, you know. I think it's the gender pay gap is something that I've certainly lived with all my working life as well, you know, and I think anybody in any big organisation has encountered it. But the BBC need to sit down now and have a look and just see what it's all about.
Well, obviously it's terrible that there's a gender pay gap, but you know, there's an element of, you know, are you really wanting me to be breaking my heart here because of the difference in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands that people are earning? There are, I think, other problems with the gender pay gap that never get anything like as much prominence as this would get. And why? Because when we're talking about middle class people earning, then there tends to be more of an uproar, I think, about that. People who are earning more money tend to have more articulate access to things like media platforms to express those grievances, whereas women who really are struggling at the bottom, where these problems, I think, are even more impactful, and then they do have a very real material impact on, for example, women's health, their quality of life, that gets a lot less coverage. So it's an odd one for me. There was a great tweet that summed it up for me, and I wish I could remember exactly how it was worded, but yeah, basically a gender pay gap is wrong because in principle, obviously, gender pay gaps are wrong. It's terrible. It reflects that structural inequality within society. But why is it such a big issue when we're talking about people earning in the hundreds and thousands of pounds and the millions of pounds? And it's, you know, almost like a nuisance when we want to talk about working class women having these problems.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I see your point, but at the same time, I think it's one of those things that isn't necessarily like where we should be focusing our attention, but definitely, I imagine, has brought that back into the discussion of what's going on. It's not necessarily the place that needs to be fixed the most in terms of like whether or not you're earning £150,000 or whether you're earning £200,000, because of course those are wild numbers for most people.
I think it's probably partly because it's the BBC. The BBC is supposed to be better than that. It's supposed to have a more developed social understanding. So some people do just want to kick the BBC, And so people will suddenly become concerned about gender pay gaps when they would never otherwise be concerned about a gender pay gap. But because it's an opportunity to have a dig at the BBC, they'll gladly take it. So I'm a little bit wary of that as well. But I mean, it's indefensible for the BBC, but it's indefensible all over the place that men are. It's in every industry, particularly entertainment and sports industries, where women are always paid, sometimes far more substantially less than that. There's, you know, even bigger gaps in certain parts of the these like bigger industries. But I mean, you know, I think we should have public service broadcaster. I'm not against the BBC in principle, so I'm always a wee bit weary of people overplaying that. You'll find that some media outlets like that don't like the BBC, like the Daily Mail, for example, will suddenly develop a conscience about gender. Yeah. When it comes to things like this, because there's more of a political motivation behind it rather than a genuine care. And this gender pay gap, you know, conversation will fall right back out of the media again. So yeah. It's definitely interesting, lots of things at play there. But I don't know, I maybe just wasn't feeling as outraged on the surface about it because I think there was some of those other elements.
Yeah, I mean, the Daily Mail especially, I think, I mean, they'll bring out this whole argument of like, it's political correctness gone mad to expect people to be paid the same for the same job, which is wild. But then again, you're right. Well, like,
they hate the BBC.
They'll just
more.
disappear. Yeah, exactly. So it's an outrage.
They'll suddenly be concerned about gender. No doubt there'll be a few columns in the Daily Mail.
Yep. And then they go right back to
well
their usual trade. Which I guess even moves us on to Doctor Who, of course, because that was a big announcement this week as well. And the Daily Mail, I think it was the Daily Mail, the Sun, and I think the Express as well. The way that they kind of dealt with it wasn't to talk about, oh, it's a female doctor. Instead, it was like, hey, look at all these times they've been nude on TV and published all the photos. That's how they decided to deal with it, because that's kind of more their standard fare. It's, oh, here's a woman doing well in any situation. Let's turn it back to sexualization, or let's turn it back to like almost that like creepy power play thing of just like, hey, you might be in this position now, but we still have all these photos of you. It's a kind of an ongoing issue with papers like that. But yeah, I mean, the overall the outrage around a female Doctor Who was bizarre to watch. I found it more. I mean, I don't care about Doctor Who particularly. I'm not interested in the show. I was just more.
You don't say things like that, Stephen.
Well, it happened.
I mean,
put it out there.
You know, people that like Doctor Who really like Doctor Who. It's like this in One Direction or something like that.
I mean, I'm allowed to say that I also don't like One Direction. Let's just turn everyone off at this moment.
Explosions happening on Twitter right now.
But yeah, it was almost like more enjoyable to see all these people be like wildly outraged about this political correctness gone mad. The idea that a woman could be in a leading role was somehow part of an agenda. When in fact, you know, every Doctor Who prior to that had been played by a man. It was absolutely wild. I mean, what did you think of the announcement, the reaction? Do you care about Doctor Who?
I'm not a huge Whovian, you know, but she's a fantastic actress, and I think she'll bring a lot to the role. And I was really pleased to hear that it was women. I worked in the NHS for 40 years, so you know, it's yeah, we used to do a joke like that, you know, and you'd say somebody was in a car accident and brought in, and the neurosurgeon scrubbed up and they couldn't operate on the patient because they said, that's my son. But the father had been killed in a car crash, and how could that be? And people would puzzle about it for a day, and then you would say it was his mother, you know, because people just don't make the connection that women can be in these kind of roles, you know.
Angela?
It's just nuts, isn't it? I mean, honestly, I'm exhausted sometimes by this stuff on social media. You just think, you're in the dark ages. What's wrong with you? It's a woman playing an alien in a TV show. What is that all about? It's like action when they made the female Ghostbusters. Why is this tearing your world apart? It's fantasy. It's not real.
I mean,
honestly, I don't understand it. I don't know why. I mean, I read this article, I think it was even in the Herald, by someone whose name has now escaped me, but it's been doing the rounds on social media. You've probably read it by now. And he was trying to make this point about how the Doctor Who specifically was different from all the other male superheroes because he was a kind of superhero not based on strength and, you know, kind of physical. I think that was what he was getting at. It was more that he was intellectual and so he was a different type of superhero role model for young boys and men that had now been taken away from them. I thought, well, why does it need to be a man to be a role model? What are all these rules that I don't know anything about suddenly? I grew up with loads of role models and heroes, and they weren't all women. That wasn't a stipulation for me.
Yeah, but it's never. I don't think it's a question that's necessarily been. It seems like it's a question that hasn't ever been asked of a man to find a role model in a woman, you know, because they've never had to do that, because generally there's always been one like on TV because of the way that roles have been given out. And yeah, exactly, that article was that kind of not understanding the broader implications, and also like but I mean, like, I think there was actually one interesting point in there, like that part about a male lead role that didn't need to be like, you know, super macho, could actually be all these other things. It's like there should be more roles like that, but it doesn't mean you can't have female roles as well. And that was the strangest point. It seemed to imply, well, you can either have men who aren't macho or men who are macho, but anything outside of that is just beyond the pale.
Yeah, I know, I saw someone on the BBC like the day after this had come out. They were interviewing people on the breakfast shows they do, and they were talking about it. And someone was making the point that it's nice to have a woman. You can have a woman superhero because it doesn't have to be about strength and about physical ability. And I thought, you're supposed to be providing the anti-sexist argument here, and you're trying to tell us that, you know, you're simultaneously there saying that women can't have strength and ability, physical ability, that's a male thing. So it's nice to have a doctor that's female that doesn't have to be about those things. I'm like, well, what's wrong with a strong woman, a strong physical woman as well? It suddenly highlighted how we're really all over the place with our senses of gender and roles and stereotype, and what we actually think men and women can do and what we're supposed to do. And sometimes it takes something like this for you actually to question your own thoughts about that sometimes, and realise that we've all got inbuilt prejudices. You know, that woman on BBC Breakfast meant all the very best when she made that comment, but at the same time as saying it, she didn't realise that she was then implying that women can't be physically strong role models, that they have to be a different type of role model. I thought, well, that's kind of stereotyped in itself, isn't it?
But doesn't
and it just brought this out in everyone, I think, that we've all got these little quips and hang-ups. I think part of the problem sometimes is we all start attacking one another for them, rather than thinking, well, maybe we should just realise that we might got that a bit wrong, or listen to each other. Wouldn't that be novel? Wouldn't it be good if we all just listened to each other a wee bit more?
But I mean, some people online have no interest of listening to anyone. They're just there for the fight.
Change each other's minds from time to time if we did that.
Well, maybe Wonder Woman will change their minds, you know.
I mean, Wonder Woman's a great example of that, though, just because, like, her whole thing was that she's physically strong, she physically fights. It's not meant to be like a different kind of hero. It's just your kind of normal superhero, but she's a woman. And and exactly that sort of strange, like, inbuilt prejudice or things that we don't realise that we associate as, like, this is meant to be a male characteristic, this is meant to be a female characteristic. And everywhere we look.
Well, I've been out in the marches with a few of the Glasgow women, so let me tell you, they are strong. Not to be messed with.
But no, some of the reaction specifically to the Doctor Who announcement was incredible. And one I enjoyed was, I think it was just prior to it, some of the Daily Mail comments about it and turned them into title episodes for Doctor Who, like you know, the graphics. And it was things like things basically to do with bras and the TARDIS, obviously, but also like political correctness should not exist in space was one of the great ones. But yeah, again, just that wild idea that somehow not a white male character is political correctness gone mad. Okay, so also this week,
that's the internet, folks.
It is the internet this week. Actually, you know what? Like, this week has been very, I guess, heavy in issues that concern women in role models and other, like, positions of power. Philip Hammond as well got into it this week for that statement regarding, like, train driving. Like, it's so easy now, even a woman could do it, and that kind of sort of did you just say that? Like, how can you still think that?
Theresa May's getting her husband to read the papers for her as well, and that's just crazy, man. Take the bins out.
Oh, well, that's because there's boys' jobs and girls' jobs, according to Theresa May.
Absolutely. That's our leader.
Okay, so also this week, the Scotland office came under fire from the SNP after it was revealed that they now have a £4.6 million staffing bill, which is, I think, over the last 7 years since the Conservatives come into power, that's sort of increased sixfold from what it was at that time. And they've kind of come into criticism because people aren't really sure what role the Scotland office is currently playing, and many kind of see it as almost like a bit of a propaganda for the UK. Especially with, recently this whole thing with David Mundell kind of speaking out as the Secretary of State for Scotland, saying that in the event of a DUP bill, I will personally make sure that there's going to be no backdoor deal here. Scotland will get part of that money through the Barnett consequences, everything else kind of guaranteeing that. And then as soon as the deal came out and there was no passing on to Scotland or Wales, he's suddenly very stum about it and not wanting to address that. In fact, even avoided answering the question during Prime Minister's questions. So people are kind of left going like, well, if you're the Secretary of State for Scotland and you're not standing up to actually bring in this money, what are you doing? And why does your office have this £4.6 million staffing bill coming out of it? And I don't know how you feel, but I do feel like over the last few years, at least very much since the referendum at any rate, there has been this kind of concerted effort to push the concept of Britishness a little bit more. Sort with your driving licence now come with a Union Jack on it, with funding projects or projects that are funded by the UK government come with Union Jacks on it now. There's been a little bit of this push, and I think people might associate this with the Scotland office also putting out its own content. Even again, looking back just at the news about the economy growing 4 times faster than the rest of the UK. Up until that point, the Scotland office, or rather Mundell, had been kind of pushing this narrative about this is all in the SNP, whatever these results are. This is the SNP's fault, and then it came out that it's 4 times bigger, and so the office was there the whole time, holding your hand through that. It does seem like it's certain ideas out there and sort of maintaining why the union is strong. I don't know. Agree? Do you think that's a complete nonsense?
Well, WASPI experience with Mr. Mundell, and we've written in numerous occasions to Mr. Mundell and tried to engage him on it. Because quite often when the WASPI issue is debated in Parliament, they will stand up and say that the Scottish Government has it within their power to put some sort of allowance up here in Scotland. But we're a national group and we want a national solution, and we paid our money into Westminster. So again, as you say, he's remained very stum on it, except for he did write one letter saying, why don't you ask the SNP about it, you know. So so the WASPI group has no confidence in Mr. Mundell.
Is there something the SNP could be doing more?
Well, we've actually set up this cross-party group in Holyrood, and come October we'll be having a debate on it in Parliament, and we've had pledges signed by all the supportive MPs, and SNP chairman have signed the pledges, and the great WASPI champion actually, is Ian Blackford, and Mary Black, of course. They've done so much for us down Alison here in Glasgow, Alison Thulis, Chris Stevens and Stuart MacDonald. They come to a lot of meetings and everything, and they've certainly been a great help. But it is a cross-party issue, It's been subsequent governments that caused the problem for us. And for them down in Westminster to glibly say, which they actually said during the debate the other day, yesterday, wasn't it? They just to refer it back up to Scotland, to the Scottish taxpayers. No. So.
And Andrea, do you think the Scotland office is worth what it's currently costing taxpayers?
Well, I would like to know what it's doing for that money. That's my thing, I think. I seen the articles earlier in the week and had a quick scan of them, and we were looking at it at Common Space, obviously, wondering how we could approach it. And it's interesting to see the figures, but I don't understand what it is that the Scotland office has done in the last, 5 or 6 years, or however many years it's been for it to have this something like 500% increase in its funding. Has there been any more information on that? Do we know what that's
I think they argue that the Scotland office were part of bringing the Scotland Act through, or the Scotland Bill through to the Scotland Act. Like they're arguing that they're kind of a key part of having that happen.
Right.
Despite the Smith Commission ultimately being the thing that sort of was the thing that brought it around.
I'd like to know. I'd like to do a wee bit more digging, I think, and find out what that money pays for, because I'm interested in the PR side of things. how much of that money goes to public relations, and of that budget, what exactly does that public relations look like? Because my concern would be that the Scotland office has been used to some extent as a campaigning arm post IndieRef, actually, not necessarily at the time, but since it. And that's not really remit supposed to do. So if that's what public money's been spent on, then I think we really should know about that. I mean, you mentioned the funded by UK government campaign. I don't know if people remember this, but there was this sort of weird after the independence referendum, and it was going to include things like quizzes, sort of like nationality quizzes, not compulsory tests or anything, but just like fun things people were going to, that the government was going to provide everyone with, so we could all be delighted about still being British, because it was a no vote and all of that. And another thing they were going to do was put funded by UK government stickers on big kind of infrastructure projects. I think it was
like
meant
bridges,
to be,
things
where
like that.
where the UK government funding had contributed towards that. So just to make that point, it was the UK government that gave you this. Don't forget it. And it was weird. It was just because it seemed to me so overly flag waving patriotic, which to me didn't really reflect what the politics in the rest of the UK. But in Scotland, we were looking at it thinking, oh, if that's really that's really the kind of thing that's going to win loads of people over. But I'm curious, I think we were looking at that at Common Space, trying to figure out whether that was funded, whether some of that money might have come through Scotland office budgeting, but we don't think it did. It just seems a bit confusing. We're not really sure which money came from what to go where, but we've seen this massive increase in budget, and it's not reflected with Wales and Northern Ireland, and it's really quite stark actually, some of the differences in the spend between what you would consider to be like their kind of.
But I mean, they have
other parts.
if we're talking about like almost being used like a propaganda arm, it has had very, I think, distinct moments where that's actually been clear. Like when after the EU referendum specifically, when anyone even mentioned independence a little bit as a potential way since Scotland had voted to remain, suddenly the Scotland office starts putting all these things of like, hey, just remember this is how much Scotland trades to the rest of the UK compared to the EU. I mean, how can that be interpreted as anything other than a specific campaign to sort of like push back a little bit of that narrative, like Scotland voted to remain, should Scotland vote for independence and stay in the EU? I don't see how that can be interpreted any other way.
Yeah, certainly online with some of the communication, it's difficult to look at it as any a campaigning arm or extension of a campaign. But it shouldn't be used as that. So we, certainly Common Space is trying to find out a wee bit more on the back of things, because that's a massive budget increase, and if some of that has gone towards a PR budget which is being used as a campaigning tool, then I think that's a misspend of public funds potentially. Then that's not what that office is supposed to exist for.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be trying to find out if we can find out a bit more about it.
And speaking of UK-wide things, I'm just going to bring this on because this is a bit of a personal one for me. So the shortlist for UK City of Culture was announced, and in it there was only one Scottish city/town, and it was Paisley, which is my hometown. So, I'm really pleased personally.
Well done, Paisley.
Good job, Paisley. It was up against Perth.
Paisley.
Suck it, Perth. In the nicest way possible. Sorry for anyone from Perth watching. I'm not sorry.
So that's Doctor Who fans, One Direction fans, and people
Perth.
from Perth.
Just all of Perth.
No one will watch this.
It's going to be a hate campaign coming at me. But no, I'm actually really excited for this. I'm very, very excited because Paisley has an incredible kind of history, and there's like really great cultural history as well. And I feel like it's like historically been not told. Like, Paisley's role in thread manufacturing around the world, which is what it's famous for, is things like the Paisley pattern and your pajamas and all that. Fine, people maybe know those stories, but like Paisley's history to do with burning witches, which is not one to be proud of, to be fair, but it's still a fascinating story. Like, growing up in Paisley, I found it always really bizarre that a lot of that history was actually very oral. Like, it was passed on to me, by word of mouth. Like the crossroads near where I grew up, which still has the horseshoe embedded in the middle of the road, because that's where they used to burn witches, and they did it at a crossroads because if they came back, they didn't know which direction to go. And there was kind of a local legend of it, when the horseshoe was finally worn away, they would all return like for their, their vengeance. Or the kind of the old foundations of the gallows, where again also witches. Oh, Paisley, so much murder. It's still there as well. It sits across from like Tannahill's house. But like in all these instances, there's nothing. There's no signs. You would never know that these quite significant pieces of Paisley's history were there, because there's nothing up about them, and it's sort of glossed over. So I think the fact that they've kind of gotten into this position just now, I'm quite excited to see like, if they manage to win that money, what they'd be able to do to kind of like bring those stories like a little bit more into like the prominence and like help share them. And also, like Paisley was a town that was ultimately destroyed by Braehead. A lot of the high street died when that place opened up. So I mean, seeing a bit of a cash injection into there, I'm all for it. I'm quite excited for it personally. I don't know.
I think it's great for Paisley. I mean, I find myself wanting to go to Paisley. I mean, it will get a massive boost on so many fronts just from having got to where it's got. So, yeah, and I think by all accounts, I've read a little bit about the campaign, and it seems like it's been done really well. There's a lot of passion behind that. Some really good folks involved in it. So they must be delighted that they've got this far. It's exciting, isn't it? Paisley.
You have a lot of famous sons from Paisley as well, the campaign. So.
Paolini, come back. Gerard Butler.
Gerard Butler,
Peyton.
Sure. The only place nominated in Scotland should all be getting a little while ago, right after the EU campaign, or rather the vote, where it seemed like independence could just be on the horizon of like this sort of awkward situation of Paisley winning UK City of Culture just as Scotland was starting to move out of the UK. Thanks for the money, guys. We're off now. We've had our tea, we're done. Kind of moving on. Okay. Well, anyway, that's done to bring us to the end of the show.
Wait, I've got a joke.
Oh yeah?
If Paisley wins, will it be the Scottish City of Culture? And if it loses, will it be the British City of Culture? We could do a reverse on that.
Do a reverse Andy
Murray.
Murray.
We could do a reverse Andy Murray joke. Wouldn't that be great? Tweet it to Kay Burley. Did you see? You saw the Kay Burley thing? Yeah?
No.
Well, when Andy Murray, I'm sure it was Kay Burley on Twitter, when Andy Murray got knocked out of Wimbledon, she put out a tweet saying Scottish tennis player Andy Murray has been knocked. Obviously trolling, but it was so subtly done that loads of people fell for it and all went nuts. Like, come on, folks. It's been done.
It's been done. But yeah, coming to the end then, if people do want to know more about the WASPI campaign, like where can they go, what can they look at to find out more?
Well, we have a Facebook page, as I said, and we've obviously got the Facebook page is under WASPI Glasgow and Lanarkshire, or you can email us at waspiglas73, waspiglas73 @gmail.com. But for those of you who don't have social media, we're running clinics, regular clinics, and this Wednesday, 26th of July, clinic at 84 Bell Street in the Uniston offices, where there'll be fellow WASPI women there. And if you want to come along, we'll explain about the campaign that we're running with the DWP and the campaign we're running in Glasgow, and the WASPI women will be happy to help you, and there'll be free coffee.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming in and joining me as well. And thank you very much, Angela, for coming in. And thank you to everyone who watched. Just kind of wrap up, I'm going to share what I think was the silliest thing I saw this week, which was a tweet from UKIP, obviously, where they were complaining this week that the it was to do with an article that just came out to do with like which projects the EU had just funded, and they giving the go-ahead on Indian Underground, yet nothing for our NHS. Or to look at it another way, the EU is giving a go-ahead to an Indian Underground, and yet nothing for the country that voted to leave it and is now threatening not to pay its bills. I mean, obviously the EU isn't going to be investing in projects in the UK right now since we're partly on our way out. And UKIP are now complaining that they're not funding us, despite also being part of the campaign for us to leave. I mean, they'll find anything to complain about, I think, in the end. Because it's UKIP.
Yeah. Well, but they have no MPs. They are pretty irrelevant now, aren't they? Only because the Tories have turned into UKIP. But
That's right,
to
yeah,
some
I sort of
extent.
took that support back again. But that does bring us to the end of the show, so thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch today, and thank you for leaving all your comments down below. We will be back again next week at 3 p.m. With another special guest. And of course, as always, if you want to listen to this outside of here, this is available as a podcast now as well, so you can find us on iTunes, and also SoundCloud, whichever way you kind of want to consume that content. But thanks very much, and we'll see you all next week at 3 p.m. Have a good week, and yeah, keep on keeping on.